Have you watched the latest season of Bridgerton? Do you have a Netflix account? Do you have a Prime account? Or is your cup of tea watching Rufai Oseni on Arise TV or even Channels TV? Whatever your cup of tea is, it is important to know that these platforms are regulated and how they are regulated. Welcome to Beyond the Brief with Dentons ACAS-Law. My name is Clinton Okwara and here with me is
Dara, Lanlehin.
And we are from the Telecommunications, Media and Technology team of the firm. Hi, Ms. Dara. Please tell us how you are today, whether the economy is treating you right, because,
I'm good. I'm very, very good. And obviously, this is going to be very interesting, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Our conversation today is bordering on whether or not the NBC Act is enough to regulate streaming and broadcasting platforms in Nigeria. It is, however, important to start with what act regulates these platforms, and that would be the NBC Act. Now, from the long title of the NBC Act, I think it's very easy to know what this act talks about. And that is, it was established for regulating broadcasting in Nigeria, overseeing the establishment, ownership, and operation of radio and television stations. Now, Section 2 of the Act speaks on the necessity of getting a license by these broadcasting stations to be able to work. Now, growing up, I don't know what Ms. Dara might have watched, but...
I know what you're trying to say.
But for me, watching Superstory, This Life, and everything like that, it was new to me when I discovered that, these stations had to, get licenses. Now, I'll throw it to Ms. Dara and whether or not it is fair to say that we are regulating a digital future with analog laws, because this NBC Act has been amended in 2004 and we have new technology coming up now. So how do you think that applies to new technology like the OTT platforms, like the streaming platforms like Netflix, Amazon, and the rest?
So, just for clarification,
yeah,
my TV shows were Cadbury's Breakfast TV and all the adverts that they used to show at that time.
Yeah.
But back to the question now. Based on what the law says, the law is clear. On one hand, it's exactly what you said.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, it says the NBC, Nigeria Broadcasting Commission, can regulate other mediums of broadcasting. So there's a gap and there's room to interpret it as digital forms,
yeah,
as opposed to the analogous traditional forms.
Well, in some sort of way, I would disagree because the law itself, in my opinion, was enacted to regulate spectrum-type broadcasting like radio and TV. I wouldn't think that the lawmaker in maybe 2004 or 1992 was thinking about AI or technology developing.
I get you, Clinton, but I did some research.
Okay.
I hope I'm not going to...
You came very prepared for us.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
And the etymology of the word broadcast is to distribute seed. So it was like a word that was created out of planting when the world was more agricultural based.
Okay.
Then it's moved on to writing, moved on to telegraphic information. But the key is the dissemination, the spread of something.
Yeah.
So as long as these platforms are spreading information, they should fall under it. So I agree with you that the Act doesn't specifically provide for it. But what about even broadly?
But, Ms. Dara, to that point, I know that it stated a broad description of broadcasting platforms. However, as we will discuss down the line, there are certain particulars of these streaming platforms and these OTT platforms that are not provided for in the Act. So with digital disruption, should platforms like Netflix be regulated in the same way as traditional television platforms? Because, like you said, in the etymology of the broadcasting definition itself, we can agree that, yes, it might fall under it. But in certain instances, like punishments, like penalties, like fees, or maybe in the provision of the regulation of like the algorithm, the AI influence in these platforms, how do we make provision for that? Because I don't think the NBC Act was made for, the technology advancements that are happening right now.
You're right. You are absolutely right. And I guess I'm trying to look at the act and find a way, but a way that these platforms could be covered. And broadly speaking, again, possibly. But there are so many new developments that you've pointed out, or you've alluded to, that the act would just not be sufficient to take care. It wouldn't just be sufficient to take care of it. And there's also the issue of the revenues that these platforms are making from Nigeria, the fan base or the user base. There is the issue of data privacy. There's the issue of how do you control their content? And having a more streamlined and structured act would definitely take care of that, because there'll be more specific provisions. And one thing I've realized in life generally is that sometimes it's until you have a problem that you can think of a solution for it. So AI and technology has forced us to almost catch up in some instances. But even with that catch up, there should be that structure that just makes it clear to everyone that in certain scenarios, this is what should happen. Can I even add something?
Okay.
There's a lot of outcry or desire for these companies, OTT companies, to be regulated, because from the angle of the telecoms companies, for instance, these platforms are running on their networks. At the same time, these telecoms companies are the ones they're making all the investments. All the fiber optic cables, and then you have this company that the revenues that these companies are making are crazy. It's a lot of money. And anything to make Nigeria great again.
I mean, anything to make our economy better again and stop us from spending so much on transport. So, I think we will need to move to the regulatory gap as digital platforms operate without regulatory framework. Because right now, there is the law. I mean, as Nigerians, we know that there's law, but there's hardly ever enforcement, because we move every day around Nigeria and then we see things that happen, and maybe the people are not wearing seatbelts and they are let go. So we know that even down to loitering, even down to littering, there are laws for these things, but there's hardly any enforcement. So even if we are to accept and say, yes, these streaming platforms are guided on by the NBC Act, how do we enforce these laws? Because most of these platforms are not even physically present in Nigeria. They don't have a physical presence. They don't have a company incorporated in Nigeria. And that also goes to speak to CAMA as well, the Companies and Allied Matters Act, because if you're making revenue from Nigeria and then you're not a business operating directly in Nigeria, there is also a contravention there. So how do you suggest the NBC regulates these platforms as to enforcement, as to trying to curb some of their extremities?
As you were talking, the first thing that came to my mind was, could there be some sort of online department in these regulatory agencies that would be responsible for monitoring? That would be their only mandate. Just going to these platforms, registering and monitoring what content is shown to Nigerians. And again, it brings me to another thing. This is a bit outside our topic, but there's a particular agency, actually the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria. They've been able to tie getting approval from them to approving financial statements. So anything you want to do, registration of your members, paying your levies, it is all tied to approving. And companies want their financial stuff to be approved. So I think maybe the conversation should be, as you've pointed out and as you've mentioned, how can we enforce it? It's fine, we have this online department. Let's say we have this online department and they spend their time looking at all these platforms, but then what next? What would you suggest?
Well, I mean, we've discussed before, and I remember that you also mentioned that in the past, some applications, some apps, or some platforms have been restricted from operating in Nigeria due to some lapses. So I don't know, maybe if you could,
That's true. I remember I can't remember maybe 2016, 2017.
Okay.
And then the then president of Nigeria, there was a statement made by the president, and that Twitter restricted, and the Nigerian government was very unhappy about that. So they banned or they restricted access to Twitter. And it was possible. And I mean, it's possible. They do it for cybersecurity reasons.
Yeah.
They do it for, well, mostly cybersecurity, and to protect the integrity or the national security of the country.
Spreading of disinformation, misinformation.
So it's possible.
Yes.
It's very possible.
Yes.
And it's something that can be explored. But one thing that had been discussed before was the taking care to not stifle creativity. Because these platforms, they do some good work.
Yeah.
They are entertaining, there's useful information. So,
Yes.
I mean, you talked about your documentary.
I mean,
And I was like, wow.
to the least point, it helps me kill off stress from work. I'm coming back home and then just.
And I mean, it sharpens your mind. There are lots of information. This is not just.
Yes.
It's you are
entertainment,
entertained by it, but you're learning.
Yes, but there's educative. There are some educative parts of it because it helps you maybe speak better, improve your vocabulary and things like that. So, and to your point on the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, in saying that the companies would want their statements to be approved, it also applies to these streaming platforms because they don't want to lose.
Exactly.
They don't want to lose the Nigerian audience. I mean, Nigeria is basically the largest black nation in the world. So imagine losing the people that subscribe to your platform from Nigeria, the amount of youths that subscribe. I don't think they would want that. So I think that's also a medium of enforcement to make sure that these platforms, follow the law as it should be. But one major point in the NBC Act, and especially the NBC Code as well, that I have issues with is the local content and cultural preservation. It would be very difficult to apply that to these OTT platforms, to these streaming platforms, because I would even like to ask you a question. What's your favorite show right now on maybe Netflix or?
Work keeps me quite busy.
Yeah. let's put that out there.
Having said that.
Yes.
Oh, I'm just trying to remember the last thing I watched.
Bridgerton, you're not a Bridgerton person.
No. Let's see. I think there was something I watched recent. Okay, it's quite old. One Piece, the movie.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was really good. I mean,
the
it was a while
live
ago,
action One Piece.
Yes.
Oh, you like anime?
Low-key.
Okay.
Low-key.
We're not taking that out. Okay.
But I really enjoyed it, yes. Okay. So yes, ask what's the...
All right, yeah. So my reason for asking that is, imagine if One Piece was taken out of Netflix because it is not local content, or because Netflix has gone over their quota for foreign content. Now, this is very important because the traditional platforms have a quota of 70% for national content that they'll be putting out. So in the spirit of bringing these streaming platforms and OTT platforms into the NBC Act broadly, how do you think this can be applied? Because personally, I think it would be difficult to, apply that to these platforms themselves.
Honestly, I'm going to first throw it back at you, but
okay.
What's your own favorite show?
Well, I'm more of a documentary person, crime documentaries.
Nah,
so, yes. So I've been recently watching a crime documentary on the killing of a popular investment banker in Monaco. I've forgotten the.
You really like documentaries, though?
Oh yes, I do. I watch a lot of them.
It's something I never really thought about until I started reading up and researching. That in my mind, it was just clear. You know, you have what the law prescribes.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that sometimes lawyers the trap we fall into. You take the law almost
As
literally.
is,
And then when technological developments come in, you forget that, or you don't, sometimes you might not appreciate that there are nuances to these things that can affect it. So it was only recently, and I have to thank you for this, that I realized that the whole concept of the algorithms influences that and makes it difficult. So now you put that thought in my head.
Yes.
So please, let me learn from you.
Well, I would say to answer that question, well, back to, let's say, 1996 or 2004, when the Act was enacted, the shows that they were putting out are shows that had been pre-recorded, and then there are set times for shows. Because I remember back then, maybe 9 p.m., we were running back into the house to watch Superstory because we know that that's when Superstory is shown. Yes. But for Netflix, for example, there are tons of shows on the app. And then the algorithm, like you mentioned as well, if I watch 2 documentaries in a week, the next week, that's what the algorithm is showing to me, because, you know, that's what maybe they think I like to watch. So it's difficult because there are technicalities to it. So I think maybe the audience can help us answer this question, because it would be very difficult to, you know, put in place laws that restrict local content, or maybe that enforce local content on these streaming platforms and say, oh, Netflix, Prime, Showmax, you have to show 70% of Nigerian shows. I don't think that can be applicable.
Did you even see this happened like 2 weeks ago, Elon Musk, the tweet that he put out, that someone tweeted and said that Nigeria, you are banned from using foreign models.
Yes.
And then he now replied and said, And then it was a whole issue. But it turned out that the whole reason was just to protect. It wasn't like, it's not an absolute, or it is a ban in one sense of the word, but the whole point is to ensure that Nigeria is promoted in terms of the models. So how to enforce it? I mean, again, looking at the content, I look at the content of my Netflix page, and it might be based on what I typically watch, but it's definitely mostly foreign shows.
I'm not going to lie, I hardly watch Nollywood. So
without mentioning names, they're just, if there are not many that I watch. But it's mostly foreign films.
Foreign films,
So when you think about that, and then you think about this, because that's what we're being fed based on the algorithm, like you said. So how does one now relate it to the requirement that you must have the local content of films must be at a quota? What do you think of a world or a regulatory agency that had, and should I say an online arm that is just monitoring? Honestly, the practicalities of it, I can't really visualize, but just some department that honestly spends their time just on Netflix, Showmax, and just looking at the contents and. What do you think about it? Do you think that would work, or that would probably be another conversation about the investment of these agencies, though, and how much?
Well, I think that takes us to our next question of whether or not the NBC Act is outdated. Because if we're then contemplating creating a whole new agency for just online regulation, it would mean that the NBC Act has maybe served its purpose. And then we need something new to be able to, regulate these platforms that are coming up with new technology. Because it would then beg the question, is amendments of the NBC Act enough? Is the creation of another NBC code enough? Or does Nigeria need an entirely new statute? So, I don't know, but thinking about it carefully, I think Nigeria actually needs a new act, because even if we're going to make new provisions or new sections to be put into the NBC Act, the old provisions are still there. So I think it would be sort of confusing for the reader or the lawyer to be able to interpret. So I think it's necessary at this point to create a new act or a new statute that would be able to help us regulate these platforms and help us regulate the new technology that is coming with the influence of AI, with the influence of the algorithm, with the influence of streaming platforms and things like that. So yeah,
Right.
I throw it back at you. And
So before we start, when I was researching, I thought to myself, the act is fine, just amend it. But during the conversation, I know I had mentioned that sometimes you don't know the solution to the problem or a problem until you have the problem.
yes,
And we've just determined a problem now about
these local concepts.
Exactly.
Yes.
And what is the solution? So the act just doesn't provide for it.
Doesn't provide for it.
So I'm inclined to say that there needs to be a new law.
Yeah.
And I know that there's something that the National Assembly, there's a bill.
Yes.
But when
it will be
progress,
put out, the
yes,
progress
that's what
on
we can
it.
say.
I mean, it's not the national anthem, so you might not be pushed as fast. So
yeah,
So once again, it's difficult to speak about this topic in its entirety. As much as we as lawyers want to interpret the law and read and speak about it, I don't think we can cover all of it in the short time that we have. However, I would leave it to our audience. If you have any thoughts, if you have anything that you'd want to add to this, we are open and willing to hear you out on the 6th and 9th floor of St. Nicholas House. Once again, I'm Clinton Okwara, and here with me is
Dara Lanlehin.
And this was Beyond the Brief with Dentons ACAS-Law. Thank you.